Hey, good day, and welcome back to the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast, where your host Chris Harris and myself, John Farquhar, we talk about all things trucking, risk, and insurance related. And really interesting stuff today. We're going to talk about safety scores, how they relate to your company, your risk management processes, and how they have an influence on your insurance premiums. Even if the authorities are not putting you on a radar at the moment, they're guaranteed your insurance company is. So Chris and I are going to gab about this, and we'll have a little fun while we're at it. So let's get at her. Hi, Chris.
I would say we're going to have some fun on this one.
A good topic, no doubt.
Oh my goodness. I tell you, safety scores, how they relate to your company and your insurance.
Yep.
You've never heard of this, there's a relationship, have you?
No, never. No, not at all. There's no way these could be possibly directly connected. Wrong.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about here. First one, Johnny, what the heck is SMS?
SMS stands for Safety Management Systems. And what it is it's a measuring system with regards to your U.S. DOT activity. So roadside inspections, which takes into account all kinds of good stuff, which could be unsafe driving, like speeding tickets and whatnot, your crashes, your hours of service, vehicle maintenance, driver qualifications, the cargo that you handle, drug and alcohol, and even driver fitness.
Yeah. And so in the States, unlike Canadians, in the States, they have 7 different measuring sticks. They're called basics, but 7 different.
Correct.
And John, what happens if we get one of these little symbols on one of those 7 measuring sticks?
Well, that there is a sign right away to start pulling your hair out. Just start right there. Just start pulling your hair out because you need to pay attention.
I've worked for a few of those carriers.
Yes, exactly. So what this means is you have one of those basics are in alert status, which is related to the fact that your score has gone over a certain or specific threshold.
Yeah, and the FMCSA says that particular symbol, based on the data, indicates that FMCSA may prioritize the motor carrier for further monitoring.
Yep.
Isn't that lovely? So when you see one of those, you should be getting very concerned because, John, I guarantee it that the insurance company is concerned.
They will be more than concerned. Yes, they'll be wanting to know, what are you doing about this now?
But why would they be concerned just because you've got an alert symbol on one of these records? Or in Canada, you might be conditional on your CVOR. Why in the heck does the insurance company even care?
Well, they're looking at it because it's all based on your performance as a motor carrier, your drivers, and how you're doing. And if you're getting into these areas of concern, so a conditional rating or an alert status, that means you're not paying attention to what's going on with the activity on your carrier profile, which tells you right off the bat, you had an opportunity to do something about it before it became critical, but now you haven't, and now this critical score has come into play. Which is alarming and concerning, particularly for insurance companies, because they're thinking you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Well, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and the lawyers out there pick up on that. Should there be a crash, and the insurance company figures, hey, the claim is going to settle for more if you have an alert than if you don't have an alert.
Correct, because the lawyers are going to be able to paint a picture that says this carrier is not a safe carrier because look at the alert status, look at their satisfactory rating, or in this case, a conditional rating. Yeah. How are they allowed to continue to operate? Because they're not paying attention to their safety management.
I just wanted to highlight the difference here between the FMCSA says they may prioritize you, where it is my belief that the insurance company darn well will prioritize you.
Yep. Well, and we can definitely confirm that for the simple fact that you and I have both worked for insurance companies, and that is exactly what we as insurance professionals at that time did. We prioritized those areas. They were a key component in us looking at your risk management and wanting to know, what are you going to do?
And exactly. And brings us right, when you say, what are you going to do? Brings us right to the next topic point, because on your SMS, they've got a neat little button right below all those scores, and it says how to improve. And if you click on that, it takes you right to the different areas. So you see the different benchmarks here. The unsafe driving is one of them. That's one of the 7. And it tells you, hey, read Regulation 392 and 397. Familiarize yourself with those regulations, because that's largely what falls into the unsafe driving. And same with the hours of service and the driver fitness. So I just want all the carriers out there to see that, at least in the States, it becomes pretty easy to try to figure out, what does all this mean and how to improve? You click on the how to improve, it takes you to here, and then you got some homework to do. But they've tried to make it clear. So,
Well, and I was going to say, Ontario's got a great website with a number of their safety standards that they provide, the modules that they have. And the bonus part is, whether it be the U.S. or whether it be Ontario, and I believe Alberta has a great website as well on free information. It's all free. If you understand the regulations, you understand what you must comply with. And I want to rephrase that or restate that. Must comply with. Okay. So these are things you must do. And once you have the basics in place, you go, wow, okay, this is very easy to comply with. All I need to do this. And then from there you can go, hey, why don't I put some best practices in and raise the bar? And wow, we can be a better operation than we are.
yeah, and hey, let's do a little self-employment plug here. And if a carrier needs help putting any of these things into place, John's here and I'm here. Reach out. Our contact info is in the show notes. Whichever lovely bearded old guy you want to reach out to, we'd love to help you. All right.
Yeah. We can guide you in the direction you need to go and help mentor your staff and teams on how to better manage these situations in your safety programs.
Well, and the reason is that we want to avoid a situation like this crash.
Yes, this poor young man. Yes.
Yeah, this man lost his life. He was 18 years old when he successfully stopped at a 26, I think it was 26 vehicles were involved in not involved in a crash, sorry. A truck rolled over, caused a backup of 26 or so vehicles, had been there for approximately an hour when another truck ran into the rear of this young man, causing the fatal crash. And, this poor man and his family are paying the price, and no amount of money will ever replace him. However, because I hate just talking about the dollars and cents of it all. It sounds like we're just totally ignoring that some 18-year-old lost his life. And that I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to say it in such a way to get other trucking companies to wake up and to do some of the things that are necessary so that we avoid another loss of life. So look at the headline here, John. 2 trucking companies hit with a $1 billion. That's not a typo. Wow. That is a B. And John, out of curiosity, because I had to look this up today when I was reading this article, getting prepared for this, how many millions are in a billion?
I believe that is 1,000 million.
It is 1,000. I had to look it up because I thought it was 100 million, which to me is a lot of money. And it's not.
Yeah. No,
it's
1,000
million.
Yeah. That's a lot.
That might bankrupt me if I had to pay that.
Pretty close. You might
Yeah.
be able to keep your Tesla.
I think it might just bankrupt me. But hey, making light of it. But so this is a crash, and what happened was the first truck driver, by the way, turned over his cell phone records, and the court proved that the first driver was on a cell phone. By the way, the second truck that hit the backup is a Quebec company or based out of Quebec. And when the
Correct.
court subpoenaed the records, they never turned over the records for the
Right.
driver. And because it was out of country, I guess they didn't have the long arm of the law get them. John, what do you think that indicates if the truck driver or the trucking company refuses to submit evidence?
That's to me, it's a quick indication of guilt when you're trying to hide something. If you were not guilty, you think you would provide that evidence to say, no, I was not. Here's my information and check it out.
Pretty.
But
Pretty darn quick, I think you'd be providing
Yes.
the proof that you weren't guilty.
yeah, yep,
Because, right now trucks are still driven by humans, and humans can make mistakes. However,
a lot of them.
we can minimize the amount of mistakes by staying off of distracting devices.
Yes.
Totally, not off topic, but, years ago I read about a guy in New York State got convicted in court. He gets convicted for watching pornography while on his laptop while cruising down a New York interstate. And
Really.
if you want to shock yourself at us men, supposedly
Yeah.
men, I honest to God, I thought when I Googled it, I'd find that story immediately. No, I was
Right.
really shocked and disappointed to find many stories.
Oh, many, not
Oh,
one, but
Yeah, I
many.
couldn't find the one about the New York State driver because there was
Right.
too many others. So
Oh,
us men are just whacked. Okay, at
Yeah,
least some of
yeah.
us.
Yeah.
But anyways, and that's a different form
Wow.
of distracted driving.
Yes. Nonetheless, needless and preventable.
Yes. So whatever form of distracted driving you might participate in, please get off, whatever it is.
Exactly. Stop.
yeah.
So,
Because this leads us to where I wanted to get to is this terminology called joint and several. It's a lawyer
Joint?
term, I know.
like a joint. It's like
No,
a
no,
joint.
it's
But not no. Oh, that
Yeah.
joint, and so several of those joints. Okay, yeah. No, I don't think that's what it stands for.
it's not that.
Tell us, Chris.
All right.
Tell
so
us what it stands for.
what does it stand for, John? You got a kind of a definition or an understanding?
I'm going to let you explain it because I know you've got the exact terminology.
Well,
know
I
you
don't
do.
have the exact terminology, but joint and several, and the easiest way to explain it to our listeners and our viewers is a quick story. When I was with the insurance company, we had a company from Ontario. They were down in Montana or someplace like that. And the truck driver is driving along, sees a single vehicle roll over. So being a good human being, being a good person, he quickly pulls to the shoulder of the road, puts the four ways on, I believe, hops out of the truck and starts to run to render assistance. He doesn't get more than 10 feet away from his truck before he hears crash. And under the ICC bumper now is a car. And in the car, there's
Is
an
parked on
injured
the side of the road.
passenger and a dead driver. And the driver died from the impact of hitting the trailer. So
Yep.
the insurance company I worked for at the time ended up writing a check. Sorry, the passenger sues the dead guy. All right,
Yep.
so you sue the estate. And in this jurisdiction, there was minimum insurance of $25,000. And so that's what
Been
this
there, done
particular driver had, was $25,000. The lady who was in the car, we had the private investigators do some investigating, and she was a lady of the evening. So, however, because that's very difficult to say in court to really being impossible, when she claims to be a model, And of
Yep.
course, her face got cut in the impact.
Right.
And she's now
Right.
saying her modeling career has been
It's
severely
over.
limited. Therefore,
Yep.
she's suing the dead guy. And this is a number of years ago, about 20 years ago.
Yep.
She was suing the dead guy for $250,000. So
Yep.
the insurance company that I worked for quickly wrote a check. We negotiated, stay out of court, and wrote a check for $165,000. Well, of course, now the trucking company that we insured is flipping out. And I understand why. I mean, they're going, what did my driver do wrong? And you're putting a $165,000 loss on my loss run? That's
Yep.
not fair.
Right. Correct.
And this is where we had to get into joint and several legal liability. I had to explain to the carrier that, hey, joint and several says that if you are at least 1% at fault, that they can have access to 100% of your insurance policy.
Yes.
And
100%.
we had a $5 million insurance policy on this carrier. So we were anxious to settle out of court, not to go to court, because
Yes.
you never know what the jury or the judge may award. And so when the lady accepted $165,000 from us, we were happy. So she got her $165 from us. She got $25 from the estate of the driver. And I guess she was happy because that's what she accepted.
Yep.
So
Yep.
now that was 20 years ago, before these things called nuclear verdicts,
Yes.
before $1 billion verdicts. So anyway,
Uh-huh.
this is what you've got to be aware of. So
Yep.
getting back to this $1 billion settlement, this fella who lost his life, the $1 billion settlement, if we get back to that story, talking about joint and several, the court ruled
Exactly.
that the first trucking company, the driver that was distracted for sure, because we have it in court documents, rolled his truck over and caused the backup, was 10% at fault or responsible for this individual's death.
Right.
The Quebec company that ran into the whole mess was 90%.
Yep. Correct.
Well, now, what
Big
I
time.
don't know from the stories is how much insurance did the first trucking company, the 10%er, have, and how much did the Quebec company have?
I
Yes,
can answer that.
good.
I can answer that. I read something early on about that, and the first truck was a U.S. truck, and I think it had $1 million U.S. And then the second one, I believe, had $2 million Canadian to be able to come into the U.S. because they needed a minimum of $750,000. So between the two of them, you got what, $2.5 million maybe?
So going back to joint and several, and this is what we don't know, or at least I don't know, maybe you know,
Right.
because you've read different stories.
Yep.
Who is, as a trucking company, they don't understand who gets named in the lawsuits. And one of the reasons that you name everybody, such as the truck drivers usually get personally named in the lawsuit, is because if they can possibly pull in your personal auto insurance, now they're stacking on top of the $2 or $2.5 million that you're talking about that the trucking companies had. So we got two truck drivers in this case. If they each had $1 million personal car insurance, that might get thrown into the pot. Who else could we name possibly in a lawsuit like this?
You've got truck owners.
Truck owners.
Owners of the company could be called into this, again, depending on neglect. The manufacturer of the vehicles or the leasing company of the vehicles. The trailer. Maybe if it was, a third party that they had interlined the trailer with or something. Those folks could be called into the lawsuit.
I've seen, what do you call third-party logistics providers? Brokers.
Freight brokers and whatnot. Yep.
Right. Because we know that there's a story out there of a freight broker who did lose $23.5 million because they were named in a suit like this, joint and several.
Yep, very much so. Yes, exactly. And that's what it means. It's joint because they're going to get multiple policies in play here, join them together to get as much money out of as they can, and several comes into play that, yeah, there's going to be multiple people that are going to share in this award, as they would call it.
Yeah, so, I just really wanted our listeners to know today. Well, let me ask you a question. What do you think the odds are of this poor family who lost their son seeing the $1 billion that they were awarded?
Oh, about this much. Zero chance. So it's too big of an award. The two companies in question, the two motor carriers, are already both out of business. They've closed up doors and can't find anybody. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, one of the companies, and I can't recall which one now off the top of my head, didn't even show up for the court hearings and proceedings. Didn't even show up. So didn't even bother. And their lawyer actually walked away because they said, well, the company's closed up. Nobody's communicating with me anymore, and I'm not getting paid. So I'm out of here. So that, I know that weighed heavily on the award from the jury as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, this poor family will receive several $1 million from the insurance that is provided. However, I agree with you. The chances of seeing anything even close to $1 billion, they just won't see it, which is unfortunate because, and what our listeners and viewers sometimes we forget is when an accident like this happens, when a collision like this happens, the only thing we have is dollars to compensate. And it's very hard to say how much a life is worth. In this court action, they said the life was worth $100 million. And the bad behavior that needed to be punished, because that's what punitive is to punish the carrier or the driver. Punitive damages were $900 million.
And punitive damages are not covered by your insurance provider.
Ah, yes. Least we forget about that little detail. That's and thank you. I forgot when I was preparing these few slides that punitive is not, because here in Ontario, it's gray, as we know. But in most jurisdictions throughout North America, most of them, it is not gray. It is black and white, and punitive is not covered. So I don't know how this applies to that Quebec company. Are there any assets?
Well, they won't be going to the U.S. anytime soon. I'm sure of that. So, and the sad part is, so you've got a very large reward here of $1 billion, and it's split in two: $100 million and $900 million. It's split in two. The chances of seeing that money are, next to nil. But what it has done is it has set a precedent in the industry. So this will be a court case that will be applied by many lawyers and judges down the road. They'll be referring back to this to say, well, we got this much money and we got that much money, and now we can go higher or we can get more. So this is on the books now. So it's going to be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, 900 punitive in most areas is not covered by insurance. Therefore, and it's a good reason to have you, when you set up your trucking company, if you have assets, you talk to your lawyer, you talk to your accountant and say, how can I best construct my organization to protect my assets? Because something like this is now something like this is now real. We both, at least I know I read the previous one to this $1 billion that I used to cite or try to talk to trucking companies about was a $350 million suit in California, where the two young children unfortunately watched their parents burn to death because a truck rear-ended the car. And what is that worth when two young people who had stepped out of the car for whatever reason watched their parents perish in a fiery crash? Well, the court said it was worth $350 million.
And this is what's fueling these nuclear verdicts is you're getting juries or lawyers are utilizing the reptilian theory with the jurors, getting the jurors mad, and it's got nothing to do with the crash. It's the pain and suffering that's been caused, and that's what's fueling these very large rewards. And some of them are ridiculous, there's no doubt, but they're setting a precedence. And boys, you can't buy enough insurance to save your butt on this one. You've got to do a better job and not get into these situations.
Yeah, and unfortunately, both truck drivers, it would appear, were just driving distracted.
Yes.
Because the second truck driver, the company from Quebec, who rear-ended and did the horrific part of it, they showed that the brakes engaged just 1 second before impact.
Yep.
1 second.
That was key. That was really, that's unbelievable. To find that information, the telematics data that's available is phenomenal in that area. But it just really goes to show right down. So we've talked about this before on the podcast when we've talked about perception and reaction time, right? So you're a second and a half between perception, reaction, and then add in their lag time from the air brake system is another half second. So we're talking a two full seconds. So this is really sad because they say the brakes activated. Well, there's a half a second lag time before the brakes could even engage to do anything. These brakes did nothing, and long before it should have, or it was way too late before when it should have happened. And I don't know. We talk about distracted driving, and it's a huge pet peeve for both of us because it's preventable. It's really easy to just stop being distracted. Pay attention. We didn't have these crashes back when you and I were driving. We didn't have these little things to bother us while we were going down a road. We were busy looking out the road and seeing what was going on.
But to be the devil in this conversation, it is not easy to drive just not without distractions because we're so used to holding that devilish device in our hand. We're so used to every time it pings or it vibrates that we check it.
Yep.
And now we're driving a truck for 3-4 hour periods of time. It's really hard. Let's be honest. It is hard for a truck driver to ignore that for that length of time. So, and I know you used to do this. Do you have a suggestion for truck drivers who have decided that they want to drive distraction free or as much as possible? Where do you put your cell phone?
I actually put it on. I don't turn it off, but I put it on silent, and I place it out of my reach. So sometimes it'll go in the glove box. In my personal vehicle, I have a center console to go in there. It's put it out of reach where I can't get at it. I'm not enticed to look at it, but I turn the sound off. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it going bing, 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 bing every time an email coming in. You know what? Nothing is that important that we need to risk our own lives or somebody else's lives. If you're concerned after driving for an hour or two and you're going, geez, I think it's probably been going off, then pull over in a safe place and check your phone.
So with that, Johnny, I just think that, those articles that come up, truck drivers, especially truck drivers, they don't realize what they're doing to themselves by having a crash. They're very repentant when they have a crash, of course, but if it can be proved that they were distracted at the time, they're going to be personally named. They could lose all of their personal assets because punitive damage isn't covered by insurance. And I wish truck drivers would hear more of that.
Exactly. So it is a challenge to be non-distracted. But we have to make a valiant effort to say enough's enough. It's not going to go away unless we say to ourselves, enough is enough. We can't have this anymore.
Well, and you're only talking about cell phones, kind of, when we're talking about distractions, because there are...
Exactly. There's so many more things, yes.
Anything that takes your eyes off the road or takes your concentration away from driving is considered a distraction. So
Distraction.
marital problems could be a distraction.
Yep. Sure.
upcoming
Family members
wedding.
with health issues. Yep.
Health issues.
Yep.
An upcoming happy event. It doesn't have to be a negative event like a divorce or something.
Exactly.
Or a health issue. But if you start thinking about your child's wedding or your child going to school, or worse, how am I going to pay for my child going to school?
Yeah. But anything, again, like you said, anything takes your mind off the task of driving is a distraction.
Is a distraction. So try, and it's very hard for drivers because you are out there for hours at a time with only the highway to look at. So it's easy to get distracted. And let's be honest.
So take frequent breaks, get off the road, pull into a rest area, get out and do a little walk around if you're bored or need a little, and then check your phone then if you want, have a drink, have a bite to eat. Don't be doing it while you're driving down a road. We've seen crashes that involved a water ball. Usually something non-alcoholic would be best.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Save that for the weekend or after hours. So,
Yeah. Or have a smoke. But again, clarifying what kind of a smoke.
Exactly. Illegal smokes.
Tobacco smoke. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I just, the sad part is there's more that we can do individually for ourselves and for other people. And we just need to do a better job. Yeah.
Johnny, as always, thanks. I think this was a great episode. Hopefully the drivers, safety professionals, trucking company owners all hear this story about joint and several and punitive damages.
Yes, agreed. Save your butt. Don't get in that situation.
Yep. And that's it for this week on the Trucking Risk and Insurance Podcast, where we talk about trucking, trucking risk, and insurance for trucks. So, hey, I'm saying goodbye. And if you celebrate Christmas, because we're taping this 2 weeks before Christmas, hey, Merry Christmas. If you just get a few days off over the holidays, have a great period of rest and relaxation. Hey, Johnny, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Chris. And as we used to say back in the day, have a happy Christmas and a Merry New Year. Take care, y'all.
Have a good one.